Genesis 1. I'm reading from the English Standard Version. Let me ask any of you who are able to rise to do so as we read Genesis 1:1. We shall read to the end of the chapter, or rather to chapter 2 and verse 3. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kind, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule over the day, to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kind, and every winged bird, according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures, according to their kinds, living livestock, creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and every beast of the earth, and every bird of the heaven, and everything that creeps on the earth, and everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. This is the word of the Lord. Well, there you have it. Genesis and chapter 1. We shall stick around in Genesis chapter 1 for at least a couple of weeks. The reason we came to Genesis is because we believe that there is the foundation of foundations laid down here for us. That the rest of the scripture continues to build out on. That if we understand the book of Genesis well, and especially these first 11 chapters, that there's many ways in which we shall be able to see how our lives ought to conform to the pattern of what the Lord is laying down here for us. So what we shall do today is we shall really lay out a framework and then come back and build upon the things that we shall see. And I shall seek to identify for you those main elements as we are going along. For those of you who love outlines, here's how we shall go through this. I'm seeing smiles across the church. We'll look first of all at a purposeful progression in this entire section. If you're looking for one word, think progress that has a pattern to it. Secondly, we're going to see the pinnacle of all creation. And then lastly, we'll look at the point of all creation. So again, think pattern, pinnacle, point of creation. First of all, note that the portion we have just read articulates to us what God has accomplished, namely creation. And it chooses to articulate the fact that he did it in 7 days. He did it in 7 days. In many ways, Genesis in chapter 1, maybe in chapter 2, could have wrapped up with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and then verse 2. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's really the point, isn't it? Because that is a summary of everything that has been done. When you speak about the chaos that we saw in verse 2, the earth being formless and dark and void, what did God need to do to address that? God could simply have spoken into that chaos and void by saying, "Let there be heavens and the earth." The end. As you're walking through the chapter, God does not seem to really struggle with power, does he? He speaks and things come to be. That little phrase, "and it was so," is repeated over and over and over and over again. There is an effortlessness to the way in which God creates all things. It is not as though there was so much work for God to do that he required a whole 6 days to do that. And once he was done, he was so tired, he took a break on the seventh day. Instead, what you're seeing is that the days of creation are being laid out to us in a way that is laying down, establishing a pattern. A pattern. Now, this pattern is given to us in 7 actual days. In 7 actual days. The chapter insists on telling us this idea that it was evening and it was morning. It also uses the word day that is used in the same way in the rest of the Old Testament as far as the Hebrew word yom. It simply means a day, so that we're supposed to look at this and see something that we are familiar with. Not to see something that is hyper complex and for us to be unable to think about it, but to see that when we think about days, that is what we are seeing happening in the book, in the chapter. What is also of interest when it comes to the 7 days of creation is that the first verse of the Bible contains exactly 7 words. It would not be a point unless there was actually 7 days that were to follow thereafter. But as you're beginning to read the book, there's something here that the author, Moses namely, is wanting to highlight for us. These days are going to be 7. And just seeing that in the very first words, in the beginning, the verse that contains the summary of everything that is going to happen in creation, that summary is communicated to us in exactly 7 words. Y'all who are reading the book of Genesis chapter 1, we are being called here to not miss the pattern of 7 that is being laid out for us. It's 7 words. It's 7 days. These 7 days are going to be important for us when you get all the way down to the book of Exodus. It is a pattern that supposedly is not only articulating the days of creation, but a pattern that God wanted the nation of Israel to live according to. They were being told that they shall observe the Sabbath. On the 7th day, the nation of Israel was to observe the Sabbath rest. And what was the argument? In Exodus 20 and verse 8 to 11, creation week. For in 6 days, God created the earth. God worked for 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. So here we are giving cues, not just merely to get in and to derive the things that we want to derive, but to understand that the way in which the Lord is going about his business of addressing the chaos and the formlessness of verse 2 is in accordance to a certain pattern. And that pattern is going to be important for the nation of Israel. In their own living and in their own life, they are supposed to be mimicking what God has done, arranging their lives in accordance to the same way that the Lord created it. Notice as well, it's quite interesting that he stops at 7. So it's interesting that it's not just one. He could have done all of it in a day, if not even in a moment. But that he's wrapping up at 7. I mean, it's not as though God ran out of numbers, eh? Could have kept counting. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. But rather, there's a routine and a rhythm here. That the days, the way they are flowing, is in series of 7. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1 again. So that the days of creation are headed towards a destination. They have a point to them, which is actually how we'll wrap up. If things don't have a point and they just keep going, they start feeling meaningless, isn't it? What day are we at again? 1,737,000,000 and like whatever. No, that's not how life is being lived. That's not how creation is going down. Creation is starting off, and creation actually has a destination. Creation has an arrival point. Every day that follows has a sequence to it. There's a first day, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and then it arrives at the point, which is the 7th. And the whole nation of Israel are being asked to live their lives in the same way. To not live their lives as though they are just following one endless journey of dates that do not have an end. But they are actually being called as a nation to live lives in these sequences of 7 where their week begins and their week does what? Ends. They're working towards a point, and they get to that point, and then they start up again. this repetition, it's giving to us a very clear pattern. You've already noted how it's really emphasizing a certain cadence here. There's a certain drumbeat. Today we had the cajon going, and it's giving us a certain rhythm to it. And that's really how you're supposed to be seeing the days of creation. You're reading, and if I read it better than I actually did, you would actually be hearing it when it's even summarizing it with that, and there was evening, and there was morning. 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 It's almost like a song. There's a song to it. There's a pattern to it. There's an order to it. There's meaning and purpose to it. It's not just flat. The nation of Israel is going to organize its worship around the same pattern in many different ways. It's quite interesting when you think about the conclusion of all of it. When Moses is wrapping up the building of the temple, he uses words that are so similar to the way in which chapter 1 has actually wrapped up. And Moses saw all of the work that had been done, and he blessed the people. It's the erection of the tabernacle. But that little pattern of 7 is defining, and it's filling up the liturgical processes of the people of God. That famous Jubilee is multiple. It's 7 of 7s. The feasts that they have are 7 weeks. Quite interesting, all the way down when Solomon is actually building the temple, it said that it took 7 years for him to actually build and erect it. This 7 is not pointless. This pattern of 7 is not just arbitrary, as though, oh, you know what? Maybe we should be eating our food in 7 bites. Right? And when you knock at the door, if it's a fellow saint, you knock how many times? We're not supposed to be getting weird about this. The 7 here is primarily pointing us to the fact that the worship that the people of God were worshiping, the style, the liturgies, the rhythms, the traditions, were arranged in accordance to that 7. So that as we are reading the book of Genesis and chapter 1, and we're seeing these 7 days, they are pointing us to the way in which God's people would ultimately worship Him. So that their worship is embedded in the very roots of creation order itself. It won't take much for us to see in this very chapter that what the Lord is doing is He's setting up a place for worship. And the way in which He goes about building out the earth is laying out patterns for His people and how they were going to go about worshiping Him. Another thing that's interesting about these 7 days is that there's a structure to them. It's interesting that the way God attacks the formlessness of verse 2 is with very distinct and precise structure. The first 3 days seem to in many ways create a framework for creation. We are told the first day God created the light. And He saw that it was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. But then on day 4, we're told that He creates the luminaries, the sun and the stars. Light created day 1. And then day 4, the stars and the sun and the moon come up. Day 2, the sky is created. The space is created. So that there's the heavens, the space above, and then there's the earth, the ground beneath. And then in creation order on day 5, it's that space that is filled up with birds that are flying. Then day 3, you have the waters being organized. And the earth as well. The forest being organized. Or rather, the waters are being separated, and you have seas, and then you have dry land. And then on day 6, that land is being filled up. with animals, with the land animals. So it's as though day 1, 2, 3 spaces are created. Day 4, 5, 6 spaces are filled up. Day 7, rest. How is God addressing the chaos in verse 2? He is replacing the chaos with order in an orderly way. There is a pattern to the things that he's doing. It is not haphazard. It is not random. It is intentional and purposeful. There is a sequence to it. There is a goal to it. There is an order to it. As you're watching God work with day 1, think about the end of day 1. I mean, what does creation look like at the end of day 1? There's light and there's darkness. That's all you have on day 1. Listen, we still need day 2. I'll give you a hint, and when you go all the way down to chapter 2 and verse 1 to 3, just you'll notice how much it is emphasized that the work is done. So that at the end of day 1, it's like the whole portion is screaming, it is not yet done. The end of day 2, it is still screaming, it is not yet done. The end of day 3, the end of day 4, the end of day 5. All of these days of creation are important, and the Lord is attacking that chaos sequentially, systematically, orderly, intentionally, purposefully, with a very clear pattern that he is laying out for us. It is like watching a master class on how to create the heavens and the earth. A master class on how to address the formless, dark void. And every single stroke by this God is intentional. Even when you don't know where it's going. Even when you don't understand how it's all going to come together. He does light and darkness. And you're like, Day 4. This is what it will look like. That light and darkness are going to be separated by a certain great light to rule the day and a certain great light to rule the night. I like how the King James says, and the stars also. As it was a little sprinkling on the top. Let's pour a couple of gazillion galaxies on top of all of that. He is intentionally, masterfully, systematically at work. It's really what the emphasis is here. And as he's doing that, he is working in order into every detail. Everything has its place. Trees are bearing seed according to their kind. Birds are bringing forth according to their kind. Sea creatures according to their kind. Land animals according to their kind. Things have their place. Things are not chaotic anymore. Things are being put into order. This is the absolute opposite of formlessness. Monkeys are not bringing forth mice. Lions are not bringing forth antelopes. That's kindness. Those antelopes will not be lasting very long. There's many things we can look into our world today and just kind of assume them. They're not just a mere matter of opinion. There's a God who has set this world in order. It's really the definition of the word cosmos. Well-ordered universe. Opposite of that chaos. And that is how God is addressing that particular problem. Notice what the result of this is. What's the outcome of God applying this pattern to that chaos. Where there was a void, verse 2, the earth is now filled. There was a void. It was empty. And in the place of a void is now a world that has been filled. The sky is filled with stars. Billions and billions and billions and billions of them. The earth is filled with creatures. There are herds of zebras galloping this way. And there are swarms of dolphins, right, jumping up and down in the sea and in the ocean. There's little families of squirrels scampering around in the forest, gathering acorns. It's a world that is filled with activity. It's not just merely filled, it is also fruitful. The things that have been created are adding to themselves. Trees that are begetting more trees and little animals begetting more animals. It's a world that has been filled, and it's a world that is fruitful. And upon all of this fruitfulness and this filledness that has come out of the order that the Lord has worked in, the Lord declares each step of the way that it is what? It is good. The replacement of the void, dark chaos, it has been attacked with a pattern, with a liturgy, with a structure, with order. And the result of that has been fruitfulness that the Lord declares to be blessed. It is good. It is good. It is good. It is good. It is very good. What an opposite of verse 2. This is not good like that exam you did in class 5 and you got 100% and the teacher wrote good. Good. Good boy. Good girl. That's good, I guess. It's kind of good, but it's a very low level of good. This is divine good that the Lord has worked into it in every way. It's good like a red sun setting. Have you ever seen a red sun setting? Or a dark orange sun setting? Have you ever seen that? It's like I don't see that from where I live. She does Nairobi. And the sky is all red. Can you look at anything else? If you are alone, which is how you should always look at sunsets like that, or with someone you really love who's okay with silence, you get lost into it, don't you? Sucks you right in. That's good. Have you ever smelled soil right after it starts raining? Just like a second, eh? It doesn't last for very long. And I was like, that's just unique. It is good. It's good like the companionship of a friend. Or like when everything in music is just right. Eh? Just to the minutia. The volume, just where the violin just came in the right place. And the way they all work together was just, who has words for that? Nobody has really words for that. God is done. And he has declared all of it to be good. That creation, the effect of that pattern that he has laid out, the 7, is meant to inform and inspire the worship of God's people. They look at that and they see all of the causes that they have, all of the tools that they have to worship this God. But you see, creation is not done until it gets to that pinnacle, isn't it? He's made all of that, And then that last day of creation, day 6, we are told from verse 26 that God, in his multiplicity, decides to build man, to create man. Look at verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. It's kind of a big deal when you've been reading throughout the chapter, that everything was bringing forth seed after its likeness, 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 likeness. And then you enter the danger zone over here. And you're told that God decides to make man after his likeness. Oh no, not another God. But in many ways, one who is able to engage and relate with this God. Let us make man after our likeness and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth. So it turns out that this very good world that God has just created, he's about to hand it over to who? To mankind. How incredible is that? Job done. Now let us make man and basically call man to rule over all of this. Here is this incredible earth. Let's create a man and give it to him to rule over it. Mankind is supposed to rule over the earth in submission to this God. Mankind is made in the image of God to worship God. But think about the creation that has been made. This creation that has been made in all of its intricacy, which is all about the worship of God, has been perfectly suited for the man who has been made in the image of God. I follow on Twitter the world's most advanced robot. She's called Ameka. Can do incredible things. Can have a conversation with you. Has some wit. She has a very human-like face to her. Ameka is not suitable as one who can walk through the earth and worship God. Ameka has not been made in the image of God. Ameka knows nothing about the smell of rain as soon as it hits the soil. Ameka knows nothing of the awe that we have when we look at that sun setting. Ameka might be able to solve ridiculously complex math problems that you and I cannot. But Ameka cannot worship God. This world has been created for creatures made in the image of God to interact with this earth in such a way that results in the exaltation of the God who created all of it. So that God has given us eyes to see him in all of this creation, ears to hear the little birds chirping, and be caught with that little sense of wonder because of that. Ability to take a little flower. We did this in my front, in the front of our house the other day. A little purple flower and crush it and smell and think, that smells like garlic. Just like garlic. How incredible is that? It's not garlic, but it's exactly smells just like garlic. And think to myself, what? How amazing is God? Ameka can't do that. This creation and all of its fullness and all of its fruitfulness has been made for man. So that man interacting with this creation can glorify God. Man coasts through it, sees, hears, experiences. All of this is enjoying God in all of his fullness. And what is the end result? He glorifies God. That's the design. That's the design. Quite to the contrary, man hasn't been made to see the red globe, the sun, setting on the horizon and for him to bend his knees and say, "Oh son, we worship thee." Creation, just like us. Man has been designed to see the sun and to see through the sun, as Augustine says. It may be C.S. Lewis. See along it and see the God behind it. Delight in the sun. It's a material world that has been created by God, and see the one that is ultimately behind all of it. It's important for us to see there that the material is not evil, isn't it? That the Lord did not create people to worship him only in spirit so that we don't really know anything else. Or if we don't get to worshiping him there, we have not gone far enough. But the material has always been meant to aid us in our worship. There's a lot of arguments about what it means for man to be made in the image of God. It's like, what are the little different points? It's interesting that the Bible is not giving us very articulate definitions of that particular phrase, but what is interesting is the word is not very vague, is it? What does an image do? An image, at the bare minimum, reflects the one in whose image it was shaped. It's that simple. When you look at an image, you are meant to think of the one that it resembles. After God has created all the earth, what does he do? He creates man in his image. It is the most important thing to be reflected in all of the earth. And he gives man a task and a duty. It's interesting when you read exactly what he tells them. Look at verse 28. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it." God wants these image bearers to multiply. He wants them to fill up the earth with other little images of himself. From horizon to horizon. People reflecting God in two ways: in their being and in their doing. It's interesting that the word we use for getting children is procreation. It is actually a fruitfulness that the Lord is calling this to that mimics what he has been doing. He's giving them a work and giving them a task that reflects what he has accomplished all the way to the end of day 6. It's all meant to be about him. Creation is from him, through him, and to him. Man has been created in a way that reflects him. And all that he does is only to make that more and more clear to the ends of the earth. We're going to see that he's going to be put in a garden that has been created by God. And his task is going to be to continue that work that God has done. There's more to be conquered. There's boundaries to be expanded. There's an earth that is empty, and there's a man who has a task and a mission, that the very ends of the earth be filled with image bearers just like him. And that work is to be accomplished by the two of them, this man and this woman that the Lord has created. So then don't be surprised if the rest of the story of the Old Testament really emphasizes place or a land. Because that's what you're seeing in the book of Genesis in chapter 1. God created a place, God created a land. And then God created man. And he put man in that land, a fruitful land, a fertile land. And he gave that man a mission to live in such a way that the whole land would be filled with image bearers. That to the very horizons of that land, There would be those who in their being and their doing, they are reflecting the truth concerning God. So that as we look future and we see what God is going to do in calling a people for himself and in giving to them a land and in giving to them a mission, that all of the peoples of the earth be blessed, we should be reading things that are very similar with what we are saying in Genesis and chapter 1. You'll also notice the importance of people in the rest of the story. That might sound almost way too basic. But you'll notice these are very, very important people. What have they been given? Authority over the whole earth. It's pretty huge. Many of you don't even own a little acre somewhere. This dude has been given creation. And he's been given power over creation. He is to rule over it. He is to subdue it. He is to exercise dominion over it. This is a vice king, if you're going to call him that. Deputy king of the earth, Adam and Eve. You don't really find genealogies other than when they're tracing very important people, isn't it? Because it is very, very important to track who is the rightful heir. And so in the rest of the book of Genesis, you will be coming across long, long lists, and they do not run out, guys. The genealogy of, the genealogy of, the genealogy of, the genealogy of, the genealogy of. You know why? You trace the importance of that all the way back to 126. That over all of this creation, God has created mankind, and he has made mankind king over the earth. He has made mankind royalty so that his descendants are a dynasty. You're a dynasty. Who are you? I'm the child of so-and-so. Sisi ndio wenye inchi, as we say here in Kenya. People are important. Why? Because of the role, because of who they are, image bearers, and because of the role that they have been given. So that if this was in a capitalistic, if the Bible is capitalistic in its core, it would be maybe tracing money. Follow the money. Where does the money go? Where does the inheritance go? Instead, we're following people, because people are important in the way in which God has created the earth. Lastly, notice here the point. It says in verse 2, in verse 1 of chapter 2, that thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day, and from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done. God rested on the seventh day. This is where it's all been coming to. This job has not been done, or the task or the plan or the emphasis, the most important thing about Genesis 1 has not yet happened until day 7. Because in day 7, God rests. It is finished. It's complete. Void vanquished, darkness banished. God rests. He rests, and this day is articulated as special in every way. We are told that God blesses this day. Isn't that interesting? In this egalitarian world we live in, we'll be like, why didn't he bless the first day? Why the first day is not equal? Doesn't the first day have its own rights? The point of day 7 is making us look all the way back to verse 2, isn't it? There's something that was being addressed in verse 2 that when you get to day 7, you're being told it is done. It was not done on day 1 or day 2 or day 3 or day 4 or day 5. Day 7 is articulating and declaring that everything that needed to be undone about day 2 has been completed. Chaos is vanquished. A plan has come to fruition. Maybe the most important thing to notice about day 7, or one of the important things to notice about day 7, is that a pattern is broken. With every single day you're being told, it was evening, it was morning. It was evening, it was morning. Did you note that? Day 7 doesn't have that pattern. It doesn't have it was evening and it was morning. It's just there. It is finished. God has entered into a certain rest. It is being called day 7, but it does not have this little formula of it was evening and it was morning. God entering into that rest, there is a permanence to it. Israel being called to observe that day, that 7th day, in all of their weeks. There's something that they are being called to anticipate, entering into a permanence that will have no darkness in it. An eternal, permanent rest that God has entered into, where it is all done, where all chaos, all darkness, all formlessness has been permanently, forever addressed. That is that rest that God has entered into. So if you're reading from verse 2, that rest is making a huge point. It's not enough to just look at the sunset and to say, wow, this is glorious and beautiful. God is great. That's beautiful. That's a great place to start. Rather, it is for us to look at that and marvel at the reality that the one who did that in response to a darkness that he vanquished. And that there is coming a day when there will be no more darkness, no more evil. There will be a dawn that will never have a sunset that lies yet ahead. Where the culmination of all of God's creative work shall be entered into by all of God's people, and it shall never have an end. Every week then, every pattern of 7 then, is looking forward to that. So that God's people were not being called to act like the rest of the world. I hate Mondays. And oh, it's Furahi Day. That's the pattern of the world, isn't it? That's how they do their rhythm. God's people are being called to do a different rhythm. There is a Sabbath rest that God has entered into, that has permanently vanquished all chaos, all darkness, all formlessness. And every 7 days, we enter into it as a little foretaste of the ultimate Sabbath that shall never come to an end, that we shall soon and very soon enter into. So my Monday is looking forward to that Sunday, for them that Saturday, every single week. And every single week when I enter into it, I remember it's not just the cycles of 7, it's my whole life is aimed at that ultimate Sabbath that shall never have an end. Where the goodness of God will come to all fruition. This pattern, this plan, this power is all at work to create that end. And that is what we're anticipating. I don't need to give you a spoiler about what will happen in chapter 3, because I'm suspecting you've already read ahead of this story. You know enough to know that this beautiful world was destroyed by sin. And as we said last week, this is why Jesus had to come. This is why there's so much to build upon. And we who are chased out as mankind from that garden, we who have entered into a world that is in many ways kind of trying to go back to verse 2, isn't it? A society that is wanting to disorder the very order God has created. What is a man? It's up for debate. What is a woman? Well, depends on your opinion. What is marriage? Depends on who taught you. What is the world? Merely material. Absolutely everything explained with its own little cycles. Nothing divine, no one behind it. Where did this all come from? A primordial soup, a big bang. That sunset in all of its beauty, those stars up country in all of their glory, don't really point to anything more than what they are. It's Romans 1 all over again, isn't it? A creation that is revealing who God is in all of His glory, shouting at us. And creatures who, instead of worshipping the Creator, are worshipping other creatures. Other things that had a beginning. Other things that might have an end. They're missing the point. But Christ came to redeem us from that. To reconcile us back to God again. This mankind who was made in the image of God for God, but alienated from God because of his sin, Christ descends into mankind and does a work in his death and his resurrection that is meant to not only reconcile man back to himself again, Colossians 1 and Ephesians 1, but to reconcile all things in heaven and on earth back to himself again. Let's read that as our last portion here. Colossians 1. Ephesians will repeat very similar language. I'll start reading. All ye who are flipping, listen as you flip. He's the image of the invisible God, 1:15 Colossians after Philippians. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he's the head of the body, the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. What has Christ accomplished? Where the sin of verse 3 has detached creatures and creation from its original purposes, the triumph of the cross is meant to reverse all of that. To reconcile us as creatures back to that original purpose as image bearers, that in all of our being and all of our doing, we would make much of this God. And creation also has hope. That work which he has accomplished means that there's coming a day when all of creation will once again perfectly reflect his glory. So Romans 8 says what? Creation is yearning. The sun, the skies, the animals, the forests, the rivers, the earth, in all of its fullness, they are yearning, they are groaning for the day when all things will be put back together again. And you know who made sure that that will happen? Jesus. What has undone the original purposes? Sin. What has Jesus come to accomplish in his death, burial, and resurrection? Sin. So that created order and that perfect plan might come together. So what do? We celebrate as those who are image bearers, but then fallen, but now saved, who are now being conformed to the image of Christ. Everything lost from what we received from God in Adam and through. But because of our sin, everything lost. The Lord is reworking that again as we are being conformed to the image of the perfect man, Jesus Christ. And as that is happening, we are longing and eagerly anticipating the day when absolutely all things on earth will be as they ought to be. So you and I then are called to live longing for that Sabbath day. He's already done our work in us to save us, to restore us. May we continue to seek the full restoration of that image as we pursue Christ-likeness. And as we do so, may we long for that ultimate Sabbath. We'll come and explore all those three as individual standalone sermons. But today, let me ask you this, working from back. What do you long for? What do you long for? What is the thing that you really believe will give to you rest? Have you set your hope on something other than this glorious rest that God has entered into? Oh, come on, throw it off. Would you and I look at it and just break it down for what it truly is? Single people, is it a marriage? Just think about it. Just think about it. God's divine rest versus that boy. Sorry to break it to you. Doesn't compare. Some financial breakthrough. It's keeping you up at night. Your health is deteriorating. Because you really believe that once you get this and you get that and for the day, that I will not have to worry about money. That's true, that's true. But if that day for you is on this world, you're not seeing clearly. Because you might not worry about money, but you might have so many other worries. Money will be your least worry. Not enough. We have all been called to live for that Sabbath rest. Saints, that's what Sunday is about. Did you hear how we sang today? Little tastes, little foretastes. They can be slippery at times, but man, thankful that they are every week. That we are gathered together like this to hear each other sing and praise and say, oh, for the day that we shall sing together with angels at the foot of his throne, where we shall no longer need faith to see, for we shall see him with our eyes. We shall behold his face. Oh, for that day, when we shall no longer pray another prayer of confession. Oh, for that day, for we shall be perfected in his image. Oh, for that day, when there shall be no strife amongst the saints, but we shall dwell in perfect unity with each other. Oh, for that day, when there shall be no more tears, no more sorrow, because all darkness has been vanquished. Oh, for that day. That every single Sunday it would be a little taste, a little reminder, yes, in feeble little ways, but of something permanent and glorious that is coming. It is surely coming. It is surely coming. May every Sunday all other hopes fade. And may this one hope again arise. What's your view of yourself? What's your view of yourself? Do you see who you are? Have you changed the purpose for which you exist? Do you have a different understanding of yourself than the one God has given you? That you have been made in His image? What is your value? What is your worth? Do you gauge your own worth by the quality of shirt you wear? The price of shirt you wear is very expensive. So you must be very expensive. Your little puny accomplishments, the stuff you've done is very great. So you must be very great. Who are you? How ridiculous is it that not only are you valuable because you are made in the image of God, but that as a Christian, you have been united to Christ? That you're called in Christ a son of God? What's your life about? What are you going out tomorrow to do? How do you engage with creation? How do you view your hands, the skills you've been given? Do they belong to you for your own ends, to elevate your name and advance your purposes? Have you become a bit more like those chaps at Babel, doing their own thing, as opposed to being concerned by one thing? The fame of His name. It's what all creation is about. It is from Him, through Him, and to Him, and we of all creation, in our being and our doing, have been deployed to those purposes as the pinnacle of creation. And now we can do that in Christ. Lastly, what do your patterns say about you? This is where I need to be sitting there as well, hearing this sermon and asking, what do they say about me? These rhythms that are being given to us, these liturgies that are being laid out for us, these patterns of 7, they are all meant to be an orchestra articulating the worth of our God. But what do our patterns tell us? What do our habits declare? Are they declaring how much He's worth? Are they proclaiming to the world who our God is? Or our habits and our liturgies and our patterns, our routines, declaring something different? God's Son has come to redeem us from this fallen world and to call us back to what we were originally designed to be. And so my prayer is that from the book of Genesis, not only will we receive appropriate, gentle conviction about the ways in which our lives are out of sorts, but that by His grace He shall use it to conform all of our lives back to what we were created to be. Lord, would You do that in us for our good and for Your glory? Amen.